From New York, this is Democracy Now!
Over the years, I put over 900 crosses here. I wanted to treat everybody with the same, respect and dignity. So I wasn't very concerned with the names or whether they were identified or not. I was just wanting to put the cross there to celebrate the honor, to celebrate the courage of someone who came here looking for what I came here looking for 50 years ago, that opportunity.
Where dreams die. Since 2001, the bodies and bones of more than 3,000 people, nearly all migrants, have been found in the treacherous Sonoran Desert in Arizona. Today, we speak with Alvaron Ciso, an artist who's placed over 900 crosses in the desert to honor the migrants who've lost their lives. Then we look at the mounting crisis in Kashmir 2 weeks after India revoked the special status of Indian-controlled part of the Muslim-majority region.
For 12 days, we have been locked inside our houses. We cannot go out of our homes. We cannot go and get medicines. We have small children, and we can't even go and buy toffees for them. There is nothing for us.
We'll go to New Delhi, India, to speak with a leading Indian feminist activist who recently returned from a fact-finding mission in Kashmir. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Brazil, public outrage is mounting over massive wildfires that have consumed parts of the Amazon for several weeks. The hashtag Pray for Amazonia trended Tuesday as images of the raging blazes circulated on social media. The skies over the city of Sao Paulo went dark for around an hour during the middle of the day Monday after winds carried in smoke from the forest fires over 1,500 miles away. The fires are thought to be directly caused or exacerbated by agricultural exploitation and deforestation. Brazil's Space Research Agency has recorded nearly 73,000 wildfires so far this year, an 83% increase from the same period last year. Far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has worked to deregulate and open up the Amazon for agribusiness, logging and mining since he came into office in January, despite international concerns over the environmental impacts of deforestation. Recent data shows Brazil lost more than 1,300 square miles of forest cover this year. Climate scientists say the protection of the Amazon rainforest is crucial in the global effort to fight the climate crisis. According to multiple reports, the Trump administration is expected to announce new rules allowing authorities to detain migrant children for longer periods of time and in potentially even more dangerous conditions. The White House is reportedly planning to terminate the 1997 Flores Agreement, which limits the locking up of migrant children and families to 20 days before they must be released or transferred to a licensed care facility. The Trump administration has blamed the Flores Agreement for driving the family separation policy by creating an immigration loophole which brought more families into the U.S. to seek asylum. The immigrant rights and legal services organization Raíces called the expected move cruel beyond imagination. In more immigration news, Customs and Border Protection said it will not vaccinate migrant families ahead of the upcoming flu season. Doctors recently sent a letter to lawmakers urging them to investigate health conditions at migrant jails along the border after they say at least 3 children have died from the flu. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends annual flu shots for everyone over the age of 6 months. This comes as multiple lawsuits challenging conditions for jailed migrants have or will soon be filed. A class action lawsuit was filed in California Monday, accusing the government of denying adequate food, medical care, and other basic necessities to migrant prisoners in ICE facilities. The suit says the dire conditions inside the migrant jails amount to torture and highlights the mistreatment of people with disabilities. The Southern Poverty Law Center Center, one of the groups that filed the suit, said imprisoned immigrants are, quote, at risk of illness, discrimination on the basis of disability, and the arbitrary imposition of solitary confinement as a result of ICE's reliance on mass incarceration and its indifference to the conditions in its prisons, unquote. Meanwhile, a joint investigation by the Associated Press and PBS's Frontline reveals dozens of families who were separated at the southern border are getting ready to sue the government over claims that young children were sexually, physically, and emotionally abused while in federally funded foster care. In international news, Italy has been plunged into a political crisis as Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte announced he's resigning. He made the announcement after far-right Interior Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini withdrew support for the right-wing populist coalition in power and called for a no-confidence vote. Giuseppe Conte took aim at Salvini as he addressed the parliament yesterday.
It is clear who is the person responsible for the government crisis, but if they lack courage, the political courage, no problem, I will assume it. I believe this is the only conclusion, the only necessary, transparent, and coherent and linear conclusion. I thank you very much.
The outgoing Prime Minister Conte then headed to the presidential palace to formally submit his resignation. If a new majority coalition cannot be formed to run the government, the president will likely call for early elections. While political analysts say Salvini is unlikely to ascend to the premiership, the immigration hardliner could gain more power as his popularity continues to grow in Italy. In other news from Italy, migrants aboard a Spanish rescue ship disembarked on the Italian island of Lampedusa Tuesday after an Italian prosecutor ordered authorities seize and evacuate the ship, ending a nearly 3-week standoff between Italy and the charity operating the vessel. The Open Arms ship declared a state of humanitarian emergency over the weekend as around 100 migrants were stranded on the ship after Italy refused to let them permission to disembark. Some passengers jumped overboard in recent days, including at least 15 people Tuesday, and attempted to swim to shore before being picked up and returned to the vessel. President Trump has canceled an upcoming state visit to Denmark over Denmark's refusal to discuss selling Greenland to the United States. On Sunday, Trump confirmed to reporters his interest in purchasing the autonomous Danish territory and did not rule out trading a U.S. territory for the island. Trump said, essentially, it's a large real estate deal. Danish politicians across the political spectrum expressed disbelief over Trump's sudden cancellation of the state visit. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, called his idea to purchase Greenland absurd. She also told reporters, thankfully, the time where you buy and sell other countries and populations is over. A former business minister asked on Twitter, are parts of the U.S. for sale? Alaska? Please show more respect, he said. On Monday, Trump tweeted a photo of shiny gold Trump skyscraper photoshopped onto an image of a Greenland town and wrote, I promise not to do this to Greenland. Trump is said to be interested in Greenland's abundant natural resources and geopolitical importance, but the island is also at the center of the climate crisis. Earlier this month, Greenland's ice sheet experienced its largest single-day melt in history. In July, the hottest month ever recorded, Greenland's ice sheet lost 197 billion tons of ice, the equivalent of around 80 million Olympic swimming pools. Experts say, in addition to rising sea levels around the world, the receding ice could expose toxic nuclear waste left at U.S. military sites during the Cold War. President Trump is ramping up his attacks on Congress members Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar after Israel recently barred them from entering the country at Trump's urging. Yesterday, Trump mocked Congressmember Tlaib for crying during a news conference while speaking about her grandmother, who she wouldn't get to see. Israel granted Tlaib permission to visit her family in the occupied West Bank on humanitarian grounds, but only on the condition she not promote the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. Tlaib rejected the offer. Trump also attacked Jewish Americans who voted for the Democratic Party. He spoke to reporters from the Oval Office during a visit with the president of Romania.
Where has the Democratic Party gone? Where have they gone where they're defending these two people over the state of Israel? And I think any Jewish people that vote for a Democrat, I think it shows either a total lack of knowledge or great disloyalty.
Senator Bernie Sanders responded to Trump's remarks on Twitter, saying, "Let me say to the president, I am a proud Jewish person, and I have no concerns about voting Democratic. And in fact, I intend to vote for a Jewish man to become the next president of the United States," Sanders said. A group of 2020 presidential candidates addressed indigenous communities at the first-ever Native American presidential forum in Sioux City, Iowa this week. 99-year-old U.S. Army Nurse Corps veteran Marcella LeBeau of Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe asked Senator Sanders Tuesday if he would back the Remove the Stain Act, which aims to revoke the 20 Congressional Medals of Honor given to soldiers who participated in the 1890 massacre at Wounded Knee that killed hundreds of indigenous people, many of whom were women and children. Presidential hopeful Sanders said he would back the act.
Medals of Honor. They're very rare, and they're given to people who show great, great bravery. Massacring women and children is not an act of great bravery. It is an act of depravity.
President Trump is backing away from supporting new gun control measures after the mass shootings in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas earlier this month. Trump called for lawmakers to unite and pass new background check laws. But in a call with NRA head Wayne LaPierre Tuesday, he reportedly assured him that universal background checks were off the table. Trump instead is heavily shifting the focus to mental illness as the main cause of gun violence, despite data demonstrating people with mental illness are far more likely to be victims of gun violence than perpetrators. Democrats are increasingly calling for a ban on assault weapons as part of comprehensive gun reform. In related news, the El Paso mass shooter who killed 22 people has been placed on suicide watch. He told authorities he was targeting Mexicans when he attacked shoppers at Walmart near the Mexican border. At least 26 people have been arrested after threatening to commit mass attacks since the El Paso and Dayton shootings at the start of the month that killed 23 people, including the Dayton gunman. Two members of the Proud Boys were convicted in New York City Monday for assaulting anti-fascist protesters during a street fight last year after an event at the Metropolitan Republican Club featuring Gavin McInnes. 8 other people were arrested in connection with the fight in which members of the far-right group were caught on camera physically assaulting the anti-fascist protesters. Maxwell Hare and John Kinsman will be sentenced in October. To see our discussion of the Proud Boys and their rally in Portland, Oregon this past weekend, you can go to democracynow.org. President Trump said he's considering, quote, various tax reductions, including payroll tax cuts. Trump and White House officials, however, have dismissed concerns of a possible recession, despite economists' warning of an upcoming downturn. Trump said tax cuts is something he's always considering. Trump shifted blame to China for the ongoing trade war, which economists say is causing uncertainty in the markets and is the biggest threat to the U.S. economy. Political analysts say White House advisors and Republican politicians are becoming increasingly concerned that a weakening economy will hurt Trump and the Republican Party's odds in the 2020 elections. And New York, Connecticut, and Vermont sued Monday to block Trump's public charge rule. Trump announced the new measure last week, which penalizes documented low-income immigrants who seek benefits, including Medicaid, food stamps, and housing vouchers, by allowing officials to deny green cards and visa applications to those individuals. The lawsuit argues the new rule deliberately discriminates against Latinos and immigrants of color and is part of an ongoing effort to, quote, reduce the population of permanent residents of color in the United States. This is New York Attorney General Letitia James.
The rule penalizes immigrants for their use of vital, non-cash benefit programs. And again, these are programs designed to encourage upward mobility, promote self-sufficiency, and reduce homelessness, poverty, and high-cost emergency room visits.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The bodies and bones of more than 3,000 people, nearly all migrants, have been found since 2001 in the treacherous Sonoran Desert in Arizona. Recent changes to asylum proceedings under the Trump administration have diverted more migrants to deadly portions of the U.S.-Mexico border, including the treacherous Arizona desert. In June, the body of a 6-year-old Sikh girl from India was found in a remote area of the Sonoran Desert, just 1 mile north from the U.S.-Mexico border, in the Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument. She was later identified as Gurpreet Kaur. Kaur's death was the second recorded migrant child fatality in the Arizona border this year. She's one of thousands of people whose remains have been found in the desert. Summer months are often the deadliest. The week of Kaur's death, the extreme heat reached a temperature of 108 degrees. Gurpreet had crossed the border with her mother and 8-year-old sister in an attempt to reunite with her father, who'd been in the United States since 2013 and was seeking asylum. She died of heat stroke after she became separated from her mother, who was desperately searching for water. Days after Gurpreet's death, the Sikh community in Tucson, Arizona, held a memorial for her. They also reached out to local artist Alvaro Enciso and asked him to create a special marking with an ancient Sikh symbol to honor her and make visible the exact area where the little girl lost her life. Alvaro Enciso has built over 900 unique crosses. Every week, he drives and hikes to the exact locations in the desert where the migrants' remains have been found and places a cross there to honor their lives and make visible their deaths that are so often ignored. On Sunday, Democracy Now! Headed to Alvaro Enciso's home in West Tucson and asked him about the death of Gurpreet Kaur.
I'm going to go there as soon as the weather gets a little nicer, because it's a hard-to-get-to place, and I'm going to put a cross for her and the Sikh society here, the Sikh community here, is going to give me a Sikh symbol that I will put on the cross. So here I am adding an ancient Sikh symbol to this cross of mine that looks like a Christian symbol, but in reality it's a marker. And that death bugs the hell out of me. I cannot get it out of my system. I guess the only way I can do it is to go there and put a cross and to spend time there and think about this death. This poor girl who died there, who didn't come on her own. She was brought up by her family, and she never made it out of the desert. So this is a big-time death for me to deal with.
Alvaro Enciso said that her mother ultimately found her daughter by seeing the vultures circling overhead. This past Sunday morning, we went with Alvaro Enciso to the Sonoran Desert, the Altar Valley, a 30-minute drive southwest of Tucson, to the site where 4 immigrants were killed in a car accident years ago as they fled from Border Patrol agents. Alvaro Enciso is from Colombia. He spoke about what inspired his ongoing project, Where Dreams Die. He says this is a project he'll never finish, as the actual number of migrant deaths in the Arizona border are unknown, and as tens of thousands of migrants flee their home countries every year to embark on an uncertain and perilous journey to the United States. We spoke as we walked.
This area is called the Altar Valley because we have the Baboquiviri Mountains in that direction, and we have the Sierrita Mountains in this direction. The migrants use this area here to go from south to north, from Mexico, which is about 40 miles this way, and They use the electric poles as a navigational point. They're not far from the paved road in case they don't feel well and they come out to the road and hope that someone will pick them up, and whether the Border Patrol, at one point that you cannot walk anymore and that's it. So this is one of those, it's not as heavily used as much anymore because too many Border Patrol and too many helicopters and too many things here. As we came in here, you saw some tires on the ground, and the Border Patrol uses those tires to drag them to clear the road. So they come back, and if they see any tracks, then they know that migrants have come through here. And so they start looking for them. But now the migrants carry these booties made out of pieces of rug, pieces of carpet, and they clear.
So you're saying the Border Patrol smooths these sandy paths so they can see their footprints?
Yeah.
And so some of the migrants wear kind of carpet.
Yeah, just about all of the migrants wear these booties that have carpet under. At the bottom, so you can't see the footprint. So then the last guy just sort of sweeps a sweeper, pretty much.
What is this area?
The Altar Valley. We are close to Tucson. The idea is that the more money that you have to pay the coyotes, the less you walk. The less money you have, the more you have to walk. So if you have enough money, you will walk to Tucson, which is that road that we came on, Ajo Road, and they'll get picked up there. The idea is that you'll get picked up after the checkpoint. But if you don't have enough money, you're going to have to walk another 100 miles, 80 miles to Interstate 8, which is the road that goes to San Diego. And, the jurisdiction of the Border Patrol now is 100 miles. It's not just the border. It's 100 miles into the U.S. So you have to walk at least 100 miles to be out of Border Patrol jurisdiction. But then ICE takes over. So it's always a layer and layers and layers of people. So you have to live in the shadows.
What kind of cactus are these?
The ones you need to worry about are these are the jumping chollas. They jump at you when they feel any kind of warmth, they will attach to you.
Talk about what that means for a migrant.
Well, at night, you will go right into one of those, and you get hundreds of those things, and you cannot remove them. And then they get infected. In 2 or 3 days, you are infected. So the infection debilitates your body, and the lack of water and everything, and then you just sit in front of, under a tree, going to take a break, but you don't get up. That's how we find them, sitting there under a tree.
And the rattlesnakes?
The rattlesnakes, there are about 7 species of rattlesnakes here in southern Arizona, and at night they are very active. And they bite you, and that's the end. You can't. Who's going to take you to the hospital? It's. You lose your leg. You start. Depending on the kind of snake there is.
So this happens. It's not only migrants in the desert, but to be safe, they want to start moving at night, and that makes it very, very dangerous.
Yes, and and in the old days, they used to carry this regular gallons of water, but now that water reflects at night, so they started painting them with paint black and using shoe polish, and then people in Mexico started making them, so now you buy black water bottles that do not reflect any light. However, black doesn't reflect light, so the water gets very, very hot, and so you're drinking water that's 130 degrees. So you don't drink as much, okay, because it doesn't taste right, but you start dehydrating.
So at night you have the dangers of the rattlesnakes, you have the danger of the cactus, you have the danger of falling, of...
Yes, and also the Border Patrol is more active at night. This is where they really start their day, at night. Everything in the desert is out to get you. Everything has thorns, and so when I ask people to go with me, I always tell them to wear long-sleeved shirts and long pants, and do not expose your body to, because everything is out there to stab you in some way.
At night, it's hard to see if there is a cliff, if there is a rock that you trip over and break a bone.
Absolutely. There's a lot of injuries here. A twisted ankle, a twisted, a bone that you fracture, that kills you. Blisters kill you. Little things like that.
Explain.
Well, you have blisters because you don't bring, in order to hike all day long, you have to change your socks every day. But most of these people who come here, they don't do this kind of hiking. This is sort of like, they tell them it's only going to be a day, but it turns out to be 7 days. So you start getting blisters, and the blisters get untreated, and they become wounds, horrendous, and you can't walk. So you get abandoned. They leave them a little bit of water, but that water is not enough for you to survive. And you hope that someone will come and rescue. That's why we have these groups here, like Samaritans and No More Deads, who walk the trails, putting water out there and looking for anybody that may need assistance in some way. So these are the remnants of migration, the gear that they...
A shirt or a cloth?
Yeah. It's a shirt, most likely.
Oh. Yes, it's like it was a shirt.
You die here and you don't last very long because the animals will get at you very quickly, and in a matter of 2 weeks you disappear. The animals begin to grab their parts, The vultures eat very well here. You see they're nice and fat. I put the first cross here about 6 years ago. But at the time, I was not very experienced with the GPS, and I didn't realize that there were 3 other people at that location. So once I started revisiting some of the sites and looking at maps and looking at my data, then it came up that 3 other people had died here. So I came back not too long ago and put 3 crosses. So now this site is complete. Sort of like it's a cross for each one of them. One guy was 17 years old, the other one was 19 years old. Young people, you shouldn't be dying at that age. You're too young.
Where were they from?
I think Mexico and Guatemala, if I recall correctly. They used to come here looking, economic reasons, trying to find a life for themselves and for their family. But now the American dream is no longer a plan. They are fleeing violence. They are fleeing for their lives. They're fleeing from all kinds of things. And even climate change, if you're a subsistence farmer and you buy seeds and you put them in the ground and it doesn't rain for 1 year, you get wiped out. So what do? You head north.
Tucson artist Alvaro Enciso, as we walk together in the Sonoran Desert. When we return, we sit down in front of 4 of the more than 900 crosses he's created to honor migrants who've died in the Sonoran Desert. He calls his project Where Dreams Die.
Siento por ti, si tú supieras mi amor, mi corazón es feliz. Si tú supieras mi amor, lo que yo siento por ti, si tú supieras mi amor, mi corazón es feliz.
The Black Shadow by Toto La Montpesina. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, as we continue our series, Death and Resistance on the U.S.-Mexican Border. I'm Amy Goodman. On Sunday, we accompanied Tucson artist Alvaro Enciso to the site where he installed 4 unique crosses to honor the unique lives of 4 migrants who died in the Sonoran Desert. In this case, they were fleeing Border Patrol. Alvaro Enciso has built and installed over 900 crosses. Rather than religious symbols, Enciso views his crosses as markings that make visible deaths that are often ignored. The bodies and bones of more than 3,000 people, nearly all migrants, have been found since 2001 in the treacherous conditions of the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. But it's believed the total number of deaths could be as high as 10,000. This, again, is Alvaro Enciso.
We are here at a location where 4 migrants were found dead some years back. These migrants died on the same day. They died all together. Here they were trying to get away from the Border Patrol. They were in a van, and the van just rolled over and tumbled, and they were collected out of here with multiple injuries, multiple head injuries. And I learned of this site about 6 years ago when I started putting crosses out here. At the time when I saw the red dot, I thought it was going to be just one person, and I left it at that. And then...
And that's where you built your first cross?
Yes, that's where this is one of my early crosses. This is very early, Alvaro. This is right when I got started.
That was one person you learned about, and you talked about a red dot. Where did this red dot come from?
When I first came to Tucson, and I took this training, an orientation for Samaritans, and the first thing they do is they show you this map of southern Arizona with thousands of red dots on it. And, you know, and I guess when you're a visual artist, you sort of react to certain things, and that red dot immediately caught my attention because this red dot represented a location where someone lost his or her life, you know, who at the end of an American dream happened to someone. And so this was the, so I decided to go to these actual locations, you know, because the map is a map, it's not the territory, and the red dot is an abstraction on a map. But I wanted to come here where the people were collected out of here, put in bags and taken to the morgue.
And who was the first person that you built a cross for, the Red Cross?
Well, I don't have the names of these people. Over the years, I put over 900 crosses here. And to me, at the time, they were, I don't want to say generic, but I wanted to treat everybody with the same, you know, respect and dignity. So I wasn't very concerned with the names or whether they were identified or not. I was just wanting to put the cross there to celebrate the honor, to celebrate the courage of someone who came here looking for what I came here looking for 50 years ago, that opportunity.
How did you learn the stories of these 4 migrants?
Well, again, you know, there's a database that is public, but the database is limited. You get the name and the age and the place of origin, and that it was, in this case, multiple injuries, head injuries and chest injuries due to a car accident. And that's all I know.
Describe how you came up with the idea and who was the first person that you honored.
I was looking for a way to mark locations where the American dream ended for someone. And I was trying to avoid the cross because the cross had enough baggage already. And I wanted to think of migration as a universal thing, that it happens all over the world. And I didn't want to use the Christian symbol because it would limit the vision of people, you know, when people saw those crosses, immediately Christianity comes into mind. And so I wanted to, it needed to be bigger than that. So I was struggling with how to mark these locations. And I tried different things that didn't work. But then I started paying more attention to the cross, and I learned that the cross was used as an instrument of death during the Roman times. The Romans built these structures to kill people. They hung them out there in the sun without any water until they died. They wanted to make that as painful as possible, so people will see that you don't with the Roman Empire, that this is the price. And it's exactly what is happening here, People are dying because they don't have any water and there's no shade and out in the sun until they died. And I was also using this very simplistic geometric equation where there's a vertical line and a horizontal line, and they meet somewhere, and the vertical for me represented being alive, because when we are alive we are erect, upright, and we are dead we usually horizontal. Well, that's how they bury us, or in a horizontal manner, and the two lines meet somewhere at one point in space or in time, and where that encounter takes place, I was trying to give a twist of the story, the biblical story of David and Goliath, where David wins the encounter. But in this case, David loses the encounter, because David in this case is the poor peasant from Chiapas, the poor person from Latin America who meets the giant from the north, with all the technology, and the encounter is always deadly for David. Goliath always wins the encounter.
And where they meet, where the vertical meets the horizontal, right. You have, you always make an image or talk about the kind of icon you have in the middle that's different for every cross.
Yes, I wanted the crosses to be as unique as possible, but to have something that they bring them together. And I used the red dot that I found on the map. So I'm bringing the red dot into the desert where the actual tragedy took place.
The red dot of a migrant death.
Yeah. The red dot that you see on the map is here now on the crosses. So the crosses are the container to bring the red dot here.
Can you talk about the pregnant woman who was making her way along the border here in the Sonoran Desert?
I learned about that case a while ago, and it was a baby who was born by the side of the road and died by the side of the road. And the fact that baby was born by the side of the road, that made him an American automatically, because he was born in this country, but he didn't have the opportunity to die. He died there. And the mother, we don't know what happened. She got deported somewhere. And when I saw that case, I said, Jesus, do I have to make a special cross for this baby, or do I need to do something with it? And I finally had gathered enough courage to go there and put the cross for this baby. It affected me, big time. How could a baby die here, And so I came and put a cross there. And then I told people that I had put a cross for a baby, And then little by little, people started bringing toys and started writing poems, and it became a big shrine. And everybody that came here will have to step there and have a picture taken with this cross that became the iconic symbol of this tragedy here. But one day the cross disappeared. It was gone. And then everybody started calling me about, well, the cross is no longer there. We need the cross, because the cross is now we don't have anything to, this was the symbol that represented this whole thing. So I went back and built another one. So that was a second generation cross. Now it's full of toys again, And now there are people who maintain the area. They pull the weeds and,
So, Alvaro, you also find bones in the desert.
Yeah, I find bones and dead bodies because I walk areas that are so remote where migrants die because, that's the way it is here in this desert.
Talk about working with the Pima County medical examiner, how you find the link between the bones or the dead body in the desert and the family that has somehow made it known that their loved one is gone.
Sometimes I work with Colibri Center for Human Rights. They work together with the Office of the Medical Examiner. They see me on television or they read an article about me. So I get a call or an email from a family that they want me to put a cross. And a couple of years ago, there was a family from Peru. A woman from Peru disappeared here. And no one knew what happened to her. And then one day a skull was found, the cranium was found. And it took a couple of years to identify the cranium. And they were finally were able to make the connection. So
DNA connection.
Yeah, DNA connection. So the family, her 2 daughters and her husband came and I put a cross for them. And it was a magical moment, things like that don't happen in my project. It's always anonymity, it's always, and that was very, very special, to be able to have the family there and me putting a cross for her. But those are rare moments that, I got an email recently from a woman who wants me to put a cross for her father. And I said, well, I'll do that when I come back from Colombia. I'll do that. And they asked me, how much do I charge for this kind of service? I said, no, I don't ask for money. This is what I do. This is my work. In the beginning, when I, some of the dead sites from the early 2000s, we knew most of the names because people carried IDs, they carried some kind of information. And because they were found not too far from the roads, But nowadays, people do not carry any form of ID because if you carry ID, that exposes you to extortion from organized crime. They can call your family and ask for money. They kidnap you pretty much. And what good is an ID from Guatemala or from El Salvador or from Honduras? It doesn't do you any good. In fact, it brands you as an illegal person here. I say illegal, but that's not a good word. Trying to be somebody in life, there's nothing illegal about that.
Will you go on building these crosses?
For as long as I can. The objective of the project has has already been, the statement has been made, that there are crosses here in the desert, that 3,000 people have died and a whole bunch missing. But for me, going out every Tuesday, it has become my meditation, my going to church, my, I'm not a believer. I don't follow any religion or anything, but this gives me the opportunity to connect with whatever spiritual thing is happening here. So this is this has become part of my life.
Tucson artist Alvaro Enciso. He was originally born in Colombia. Alvaro has created more than 900 crosses to honor migrants who've died in the Sonoran Desert. He calls his project Where Dreams Die. Special thanks to our Democracy Now! Desert team, Maria Taracena, Libby Rainey, Charina Nadura, Tay Astudio, John Hamilton, and Dennis Moynihan. Go to democracynow.org to see more from our series, Death and Resistance on the U.S.-Mexican border, including our report Monday on the No More Deaths volunteers who drop water in the desert to save migrants. One of them, Scott Warren, faces 10 years in jail. Back in a minute. Crazy Sun by Sidewinders, a band from Tucson, Arizona. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we turn to part two of our conversation with two New York State legislators, State Senator Alessandra Biaggi and New York Assembly member Yuh-Line Niou, who helped pass the Child Victims Act in New York. The state law, which went into effect exactly 1 week ago, last Wednesday, extends the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse and includes a look-back period, giving survivors of any age a year to take legal action, even if their cases had expired under the old statute of limitations. Well over 500 lawsuits have already been filed in this first week. Both legislators Biaggi and Niou are sexual abuse survivors themselves and have spoken about the importance of the Child Victims Act in personal terms. I began by asking New York State Senator Alessandra Biaggi how it feels to be able to pass legislation that will help so many people.
It makes me feel lots of different emotions. First of all, it is very surreal, and every time I speak about it, as Assemblywoman Niou has mentioned, it brings back and reopens part of the trauma and the memory that I wish I could forget, but that stays with me forever. But at the same time, the more that I speak about it and the more that I'm able to use what has happened to me to help others and to speak about what people can do, the less pain that I feel. It is a remarkable thing. It is a privilege to be able to transform trauma into real action that will help, we know, will help hundreds, if not thousands, of people across the state of New York. And, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't say how grateful I am to Senator Brad Hoylman, the Senate sponsor, as well as Assemblywoman Rosenthal, because the two of them fought very powerful currents of institutions and triumphed.
And we also have to, of course, mention Marge Markey, who was one of the first sponsors in the Assembly.
Well, Assemblywoman Yuh-Line Niou, you shared your experience, as you mentioned in part one of our interview, of being a survivor of child sexual abuse when you voted in favor of the Child Victims Act in January.
Years old, and it was a teacher. And I can still smell him. I can still smell what he smells like. And I told people in my conference last year when we were about to speak on the bill about my experience. But I think, you know, it's not something that I like to bring up because it's something that's so shameful and so horrible and so traumatic of an experience to me, to many of the other victims, that it's really, really hard to bring up. It's really hard to talk about it for many, many reasons. I literally can't stop shaking. And so I just wanted to let you guys know that your vote is so important to me and so important to those victims. Thank you so much.
Assemblywoman, that's you speaking about this bill and your support for it, this act. What kind of response did you receive to your testimony?
So one of the hardest things, I think, is that so many folks, I mean, I talked about it with Senator Biaggi, but so many folks are now reaching out and telling us about their stories, and we've been hearing so many people have been silenced for so long, and I think that that's one of the things that is so significant, that just in one day we saw hundreds of people they were ready to talk, and our laws should have been ready to listen, and they weren't. And I think that that's really significant that that we made these changes in a time when, of course, they were long overdue, but before, you know, folks passed away, before folks, you know, couldn't have a chance to speak up anymore.
And explain again what people can do right now, now that the Child Victims Act has passed. What is the timeline, no matter when the abuse happened, This is only if you live in New York State?
That's right.
Or if your perpetrator is in New York State?
If the act happened in New York State. If the perpetrator doesn't have to live here anymore, but they, can still be held accountable in New York.
And you don't have to live here.
You don't have to live here anymore. But if this has happened in New York State, then this is something that you can bring to the courts. New York State courts have jurisdiction over what happened to you. And I think that...
And for the next year?
Yep, for the 1 year look-back period starting yesterday. As of yesterday, we have 1 year until August 14th of next year to actually be able to hold, people accountable. It doesn't matter what age you are.
Let's go to State Senator Alessandra Biaggi. Her testimony, how she prefaced her vote in favor of the Child Victims Act in January, speaking about her own trauma.
I am a sexual abuse survivor, and this bill is incredibly important to me. The shame that abuse creates turns oftentimes into silence, and without a system that encourages and protects victims who share their experiences, the trauma manifests into many different forms. For me, that silence lasted for 25 years. And it is almost unthinkable that I could stand here as a New York State senator to speak about something that I thought I would probably take to my grave. To the survivors and to the advocates, but mainly to the survivors of these heinous acts. The acts of terror that you have endured does not make you less human. You are worthy of a world that respects your body and your being, and at the very least, includes legal redress for what you have endured. As a member of this body, of the New York State Senate, I am proud to vote aye. Madam President, thank you very much.
That's New York State Senator Alessandra Biaggi prefacing her vote for this really revolutionary law that has been passed in the legislature, signed off on, has gone into effect as of yesterday. So tell us about what it felt like to describe your own experience, both of you did, and what happened in this legislature, in the both Senate where you are and in the House.
It felt...
did you coordinate this?
So we did not coordinate it, and it felt very liberating, but also very sad. I think that every time that I speak about it, it makes me angry, although less angry each time, because I think that there is an underestimation of how much child sexual abuse affects someone's life. I know that for the rest of my life, that I'm on this earth, this will be something that affects the way that I interact with others, as Assemblywoman New has mentioned, my relationships, the way I think and feel about myself. There are issues of self-worth and confidence, and I think if you're looking at me and where I am right now, or you're looking at the video, you're thinking, how could she possibly be, worried about confidence? It's real. It's a very real thing, and you live with it every single day. Now, when I spoke about what had happened to me as a child, I had no idea that at the same exact moment in the assembly, just down the hall in a different chamber, that there were 3 women also speaking about their abuse. The significance of that is not to be, I think, really made small, because I think before I was speaking, if someone said, do you feel lonely in this feeling? I would have said, no, I don't. I feel like I've spoken about it. I have my family surrounding me. I have my, at the time, fiance, now husband, supporting me in doing this and also with me on my journey to heal. But when I learned that they had spoken about it as well, I felt Assemblywoman New, Assemblywoman Cruz, Assemblywoman Bishat, I felt less alone. There is really less darkness in my life now because of these other 3 women who have spoken about it. And the fact that we were all able to come together, thanks to Safe Horizon and Alexis Grinnell and all of their work that they've done for this PSA, and have really, again, it's transforming this pain into something that is actionable, makes it less of a burden, although it's still a burden, but less of a burden, and also allows us to focus on the action-oriented part of it, which is to spread awareness so everybody in the state of New York who is affected by this knows.
What was the institutional response? Who fought you on this? I mean, as you said, you grew up a Catholic. Clearly, the Catholic Church has to be quaking right now in New York.
Yes. I mean, the institutional response, I think, previously, and there was a fight, I think, even up to bringing this bill to the floor. And I had mentioned this a little bit in the earlier segment, which is that the Catholic Church in New York had spent $2.1 million lobbying against the Child Victims Act. $2.1 million at a time when New Yorkers have a housing need, are food insecure. Are you kidding me? That is so outrageous. I will say that when I spoke up, my colleagues in the Senate on both sides of the aisle were incredibly supportive. Some members shared with me that they also had been abused as children. That was a very unexpected thing that had happened. And I think just me speaking gave them the opportunity, or at least, again, the space to be able to say, oh, that happened to me too. And also, this is what child sexual abuse looks like. It doesn't have one face. It looks like myself and Assemblywoman New and Assemblywoman Cruz and Assemblywoman Bishop, but it also looks like other individuals. There is not one face of child sexual abuse, and it was important, I think, to make sure that that was very clear, because we want everyone to know what it looks like and what they can do.
New York State Senator Alessandra Biaggi and New York Assembly member Yuli New, who helped pass the Child Victims Act. The New York state law extends the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse. It is believed that nearly 1,000 lawsuits have been filed since last Wednesday, when the law went into effect. Also, we plan to have an update on the crisis in Kashmir later in the week. That does it for our broadcast. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Tammy Warrenoff, Libby Rainey, Sam Alkoff, John Hamilton, Ravi Karen, Hani Massoud, Sharina Nadura, Taymarie Astudio, and Maria Taracena. Mike DeFilippo and Miguel Noguera are engineers. Special thanks to Becca Staley, Miriam Barnard, Hugh Gran, David Prude, Ishmael Daro, Vesta Godars, and Karl Marxer. Also tomorrow on Democracy Now! We'll bring you more on the first ever Native American presidential forum that took place in Sioux City, Iowa. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.